In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at a few more NHL trade rumors. A lot of today's rumors are fueled by injuries. There's been a lot of NHL top players going down with injuries as of late, so we'll get you all up to date on the injury front as well. And that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, there's a lot of news items to get through today. A lot of top players have gone down with injury as of late, which is certainly a cause for concern for their teams heading into the trade deadline, and will certainly have a big impact on what these teams decide to do, whether they add, subtract, or whatever their plans may change here as a result of these. So let's get into all the latest news. Let's kick things off with the Edmonton Oilers in the news that just broke that Connor MCDavid is going to be out of action for about 2 to 3 weeks. Of course, we've seen that he had another leg injury. There's obviously some concern due to the knee injury that he suffered at the end of last year. Fortunately, it's nothing like that. It's a quad injury, and they're evaluating him now. He's gone back to Toronto for some additional evaluations and treatments, and they're estimating 2 to 3 weeks. So the Edmonton Oilers right now sit in a playoff spot. They're in a decent spot in the standings. The only problem is that it's so tight. All it takes is a couple of wins or a couple of losses, and your standing position can change drastically, where they go from first place to second place or to out of the playoffs. So clearly, McDavid's going to miss a number of games. It's going to put a lot more pressure on a guy like Leon Draisaitl, who can certainly handle it. It leads the way for the Oilers in scoring. But those two are a dynamic duo. You take one half of that away, it certainly impacts the amount of offense that can be generated without Connor McDavid, arguably the top player in the NHL, in the lineup. So I guess we'll see how that impacts Ken Holland and what his plans are. We've seen him recently sign Darnell Nurse to an extension. There is some other talk that he might be looking to extend a few other players, possibly ahead of the deadline, like Riley Shea is a name that's come up as well. They might be looking to extend him on a 1 or 2 year deal. That we might see that here in the coming days ahead of the deadline. But the Oilers have been in the market for a winger for some time, and they've yet to land one. Of course, Jason Zucker is now off the market for all teams looking for wingers. He just landed in Pittsburgh in a late night trade between the Wild and Penguins that we reported on last evening. I don't think Zucker would have went to the Oilers anyway, even though he probably would have been a good fit and a nice addition there. It's believed that with his partial no trade clause that all of the Canadian teams were on that list, so that likely wouldn't have happened, which he was almost traded to Calgary before, but the deal never went through. So I guess we will see what the Oilers do, but McDavid's injury is certainly going to be significant. Now, sticking with the Canadian teams that are fighting some injuries, of course, the Montreal Canadiens are now without captain Shea, who could be out for an indefinite period of time. It's not quite clear exactly what kind of timelines we're looking at with Shea. It seems as though the Habs kind of have his health condition somewhat on lockdown. Everybody's kind of in the dark on what they're looking at, but based on information from Bob McKenzie on Twitter earlier today, it is believed that there is concern that the injury could be serious and he could be out longer term. So that could clearly impact the plans for GM Marc Bergevin ahead of the deadline. The Montreal Canadiens already have an uphill battle to get into the playoffs. I think it's going to be a struggle and very difficult time for them to do that. And you take away their captain, their top defenseman, that's just going to make things that much more challenging and more difficult for sure, and it could impact what moves Bergevin makes. But either way, personally, I think Montreal is going to have a relatively quiet deadline. I can see them maybe selling off 1 or 2 pieces, but I don't see Bergevin doing anything too drastic. I think for the most part, they're going to chuck up this season as being riddled by injury and kind of reset for next year with some minor tweaking. We might see a few additional moves during the offseason. But sticking with top defensemen that are out, the Columbus Blue Jackets, as we reported yesterday, are going to be without their top defenseman, Seth Jones, for a while. There's a little bit more information out. It looks as though Jones is going to need surgery, and he could be out for an indefinite period of time, which could mean the rest of the regular season. It's not quite clear exactly, but there is some rumblings that very well might be possible. Of course, Columbus is also in a very tight race like the Oilers in that Metro division. The Blue Jackets have certainly done way better than expected this year, and they keep facing adversity. And can they face this adversity as well without a player who's, arguably their most important piece back there? They've been getting terrific goaltending and timely scoring, so I guess we'll see if the Blue Jackets can continue. Like I said before, I don't see the Blue Jackets really rushing out and making any big moves and doing anything crazy like they did at the deadline last year. I just don't think they have the assets to be able to waste or trade off for that possibility. So we'll see how they handle the Seth Jones injury, but right now it's looking like it's serious and could be out for a significant period of time. Now, the Calgary Flames are another team we've talked about who likely could be moving a defense and trying to add a forwards, but the narrative has been all season, and things are looking a little bit different right now. Of course, we know Captain Mark Giordano's out with a hamstring injury. That's going to be like a week-to-week type of situation. Not quite clear exactly how long he's going to be out, but after a week or so, he should, hopefully, if the treatments work well, be able to return. And Travis Hamonic is now out as well. There's been a lot to talk about TJ Brodie being traded for a top 6 or a top 9 forward, but you can't really be trading your remaining experienced defenseman. A couple of your top other guys are out injured, so it's going to be dependent on what happens with the health of those other players before the deadline. It is still a possibility we could see a move like that from the Flames, but it's getting less and less likely as that blue line gets more and more decimated with injuries. But clearly the Flames do need another top 6 or top 9 scorer. A player like Mark Jankowski would be a prime trade target, as I mentioned before, Sam Bennett. The only problem with Jankowski is I don't think there's a lot of value there, and in Bennett's case, they might choose to hold on to him and make that type of deal later on just because of the grit and sandpaper and type of role he can play in the bottom 6 lineup, which could be very helpful in a long, hard-fought playoff series. The Detroit Red Wings have placed longtime defenseman Jonathan Ericsson on waivers again. Of course, this is the second time we've seen this happen this year. Earlier, he went unclaimed, reported down to the minors, played for a while, and was eventually recalled, mostly due to the fact that the Red Wings had a lot of injuries on their blue line. He's going to be placed on waivers again, and I assume he'll probably clear, but you never know. Somebody might grab him. He is a pending UFA, so at least there's not a lot of term attached to his contract, but I would think it's unlikely he gets claimed considering the other notable defenseman that it could be had for trade. I guess the only difference with the waiver wire is you're not giving up another asset in return to grab that. And there's lots of teams looking for defense, so you never know. Maybe somebody takes him, but unlikely. More than likely he goes to the minors, finishes out the rest of the season. And then hard to say, I think his NHL career might come to a close. He could possibly play over in Europe if he continues to want to play pro hockey a little bit longer. Now, another team who has been linked to making a big move and adding another top 6 forward as well is the Colorado Avalanche, who's having a very successful season, but they're another team, like I've already mentioned with the others, that are going to be facing some adversity, some injury. Forward Nazem Kadri, who's certainly been playing a big role since coming over in that trade with the Leafs for Tyson Barrie. Kadri's going to be out for an indefinite period of time. It's not quite clear, at least a few weeks more than likely here. So that's going to probably accelerate their plans. I mean, even with Kadri in the lineup, they've been wanting to add a forward, and this very well could put a little bit more pressure on them to get something done. Clearly, we saw the Penguins jump the gun last night, like I said, with Zucker, so some teams are kind of trying to get ahead of the deadline while there's more options out there. Of course, the Avalanche have been linked to Rangers forward Chris Kreider a lot. That certainly would make a lot of sense. I think he would fit in quite nicely with that speed and size and skill that he brings. He's having a pretty good season, would be a great rental player for the Avalanche, but as we've also reported, the contract negotiation extension talks have likely gotten underway here with the Rangers and Kreider. They were supposed to start this week, so it's not a foregone conclusion that the Rangers do trade him. There's some that think that it's vital for him to stay with New York and really help take them through the rest of this rebuild. So I guess we'll see, but I think more than likely Kreider, in my opinion, I think he gets traded because I think he'll get a lot more money on the open market, and as much as he probably likes it with the Rangers, at the same time he wants to get paid fairly. So I guess we could see, and even if he is traded, doesn't mean he couldn't re-sign with the Rangers in the summertime. So I guess we will see if the Avalanche plans here might accelerate a move because of the Kadri injury, and if Kreider might be a player that they're zeroing in on here that we've heard about for the last number of weeks. Latest article from Joe Haggerty of NBC Sports covering the Boston Bruins suggests maybe they look to the New Jersey Devils for their top 6 acquisition. If they don't land Chris Kreider, the Bruins are another team been linked to the Rangers forward for a big chunk of the season since it became clear the Rangers weren't going to become a playoff team this year. He suggests another potential target, which more likely would cost less, would be forward Kyle Palmieri of the New Jersey Devils. Of course, we saw the Bruins go to New Jersey last year and acquire Marcus Johansson, who fit in quite nicely with the Bruins and was a big help to their playoff success. Could they go back to New Jersey again and make another acquisition, this time with a different GM, with interim GM Tom Fitzgerald now at the helm in New Jersey? Not quite clear how Fitzgerald's going to handle things. He doesn't have a permanent job there himself, and he's likely going to want to be cautious with what he does to make sure he likely has a good shot at getting the permanent job here in the short term. I would imagine that decision won't be fully made until the summertime, but Palmieri's a player who's already put up 20 goals. He's got about 35 points in 50 games. Productive player on a very not so strong team here, so clearly Palmieri could be an offensive weapon added to a variety of teams, including the Bruins. He's not that big, strong, kind of physical forward that you kind of think of when you think of the Bruins and what they might be looking to add. Very different acquisition than Kreider would be, but clearly might cost less and also comes with a year on his contract, so it wouldn't be just a rental player. We've seen the Bruins add a lot of rental players here in the last number of years. You can't help but wonder, too, if there could be a reunion with their former first overall pick and Joe Thornton. I mean, Joe Thornton's a player who's kind of been rumored to possibly be chasing the Stanley Cup with another franchise, since it's pretty clear San Jose is pretty well out of it at this point, or at least is pretty close to being out of it, and you can't help but wonder if a reunion there could take place. I wouldn't think the price tag would be very much for Jumbo Joe to be acquired, so I guess we will see what the Bruins' plans are, and if they want to go down the road of a rental player or add a guy with term like Palmieri or, like I said, or Chris Kreider, who's been in their crosshairs for most of the year as well. And lastly here, I want to touch on the Anaheim Ducks. There's been a lot of talk about Ondrej Kase, another player who's also been linked to the Bruins that we just discussed, so could be another cheaper acquisition than Kreider. A guy like Palmieri fits well, but Kase also makes sense. Similar type of player, can play with speed, can certainly be offensive threat. Kase was a former 20-goal scorer, but the last year or two certainly had his fair share of injuries and setbacks, playing on a Ducks team that's also been weakened and not as offensive as they used to be, so the offense has been a little bit harder to come by when you factor in all those things, but still a young player who could contribute and is also in the final year of his deal. He'll need a new contract for next season. Kase is not the only member of the Ducks that likely could be dealt. There's a lot of belief as well that defenseman Michael Del Zotto could find himself on the move again as another deadline acquisition for a team to add a depth defenseman. So we mentioned there's lots of teams out there looking for them, and Del Zotto's a guy who could add some extra insurance pieces for many teams around the league. Another guy too who could be very much a under the radar type of acquisition at the deadline, but it's having a very nice season, and kind of like I said, because the Ducks are not getting a ton of attention and kind of not in a playoff spot, Derek Grant, I think it would be a nice fourth line, bottom six center iceman to a lot of teams could make an acquisition and really shore up their face-offs, penalty kill, and just have that extra guy who's gained a fair bit of experience now in the last number of years. Grant broke into the league with Ottawa a number of years ago, kind of bounced around up and down between the NHL and AHL for some time. Then has been a little bit of a journeyman, bounced around, but it's more than anything spent more time with the Ducks here in the last few years than any other team, but certainly a player who could make a nice addition to a team chasing a Stanley Cup. So that is all your news and rumor updates for today. Of course, as always, want to know your thoughts and opinions and everything discussed today, so make sure you leave lots of comments down below and we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.